This week looms as an interesting week of trades for you, doesn't it? Some big strategy decisions to make. There's a lot of upgrade options we could be taking. We will see some divergence in teams, but there's not the downgrade options that we love, and the buys are fast approaching. Here at the Coaches Panel on this week's strategy session, we've got you covered as we help you navigate this critical week of trades and critical week of decisions as we get ever closer to the middle portion of the year. Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I do hope you are well, and joining me on this podcast as he has right throughout not only this season proper in the preseason, but for the past couple of years, it's fellow panelist MiniMonk. Nice to see you up and about, my friend. And it is a big week of moves that we've got to talk people through, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've said that for the last 3 weeks, and every week it just somehow gets even more hectic with the moves that we have available to us and where coaches are actually looking to go. So I'm really keen to chat about it this week.
And for the first time on a strategy session this year, now, normally we keep them quite close and intimate with just one member of the panel or one guest of the community, but we decided we'd let somebody else join the podcast. He is one of the fellow founders of the Coaches Panel. He's the current #1 ranked coach in Dream Team. By the way, I think Middy's 3. I'm in the top 40. Like, there's a lot of Coaches Panel. I think Fox is somewhere in the top 50 too. So there's a lot of Coaches Panel over in that format. But besides that, he did retire from being active on the team, but he's never been too far away. But we had to stretch him out of retirement at least for one game. Rids, hello, mate. Nice to hear from you again.
Hey, MJ. Long time no hear. What's happening?
Well, I was about to ask you. Now, I know you've taken a little bit of time off from just making content as a part of the Coaches Panel. You haven't given up playing the game. You've just taken kind of a step back for a number of different reasons, but you've had a bit of a different start to 2025. And I'm not just talking having a good start to the year in fantasy.
Well, let's just tie it up like this. There's nothing you can do when lying in a hospital bed for 6 weeks. But study DT. And AFL Fantasy. So I've taken the most of the opportunity. But really, long story short, and it's not about me, I've had a bit of a poor start to the year health-wise, but we're on the way back. We're bouncing back up. So I'm going to be in for the long haul in the DT #1, hopefully.
Yes.
But we'll see what happens, yeah? I've got to keep these young upstarts away, from clipping at my heels, yeah?
Yeah, that's it. The fossils are back, my friends, to stop the young upstarts. So,
hey, MJ, just quickly too, you were a fossil at the age of 30.
I think it's because I had 3 kids by the time I was 28. So that probably puts me as a fossil in comparison to a lot of people. So yes, that's very, very true.
I heard someone say that your hair moves as much as a bone of a dinosaur, mate. It's just that hard. You put so much product in it. So, yeah. So anyways, it's good to be back.
Not even 5 minutes into the podcast, he gives us an update about being on a hospital bed and bang! The hair comments. I haven't missed that one little bit. Don't you worry, friends. We've got a run sheet, and Rids, for old school listeners, he's going to do exactly what he normally does. He will take us in directions that we had planned. Maybe we should start talking about the buys, because we've already had a bunch of them, Mini, to start the year, and it only just felt like we've got out of best 18. But we are fast approaching probably one of the biggest mid-season buy blocks that I can recall as having in fantasy football. When you put that and the upgrade cadence that we're trying to hit, it can be a tricky time. And we can undo some good work that we've done over the first 2 months of the year. How should we be looking at the buys with the trades that we're making and these impending decisions that are coming?
Well, it's a very tricky year for it because we're kind of in uncharted territory with regards to how the buys have structured up. Normally we've had them, old school over 3 weeks or even over 2 weeks, then over the 4 weeks with the one team the one buy round having just the 2 teams. Now we're into the 5-week territory with only 4 teams on the buy in any given week at most. It really does make it easier to be able to field a respectable score and a lot of respectable players. And I think it might make it, I guess, in my opinion, and the way that I'm looking at it is it makes incentivizing having a very even spread across the bye rounds even more important, because if you get to a quote unquote a completed team, you have 22 players and you have just the 4 premiums missing on an even bye round, you're still rocking out 18 premium scores. And that's hopefully your best 18. You get the chance for one of your rookie type scores to maybe pop something that covers a premium that has a bad day. But if you can get that split across all 5 of the bye round weeks, you are really going a long way to be able to have a good bye round period. So I think that's the big challenge, is how a different coach is going to approach the typical structure for lining up the buys. Are we wanting to back end like we typically have in the past? And just what is the best structure to have, I guess, across all of the bye rounds coming into this bye round season?
Yeah, Ritz got some thoughts on that for us?
Yeah, so I would suggest that it impacts your trade upgrades right now as you move forward towards the buys. Because the fact is, everyone has a buy, yeah? But the fact is, you don't need to own them during their buy if they've got an early buy. So you can plan to trade into them post-buy. So you just got to start doing a little bit of planning, work through it. So the guys like Sheasel, North Melbourne, Carlton, Port Adelaide, Western Bulldogs, they're the round 12 buys. So you just have to go out and identify the key upgrades there. Now, I don't think anyone's really looking at a Zach Butters right now, because he's really at, pretty top priced. We are probably looking at a Sheasel because he is dropping in price and the role is starting to become more familiar to us, as fantasy owners, coaches. So just do a little bit of planning. You don't have to jump into someone straight away. If you have to pay 50 or 60,000 extra, maybe you're better off, because if you maximize those points through the buys, you could get a rank jump.
Yeah, for sure. Minnie, I'm curious. You mentioned how spread the buys are, which is both a positive and a negative in AFL fantasy. It kind of feels like an extra bonus set of trades we're going to get with the 3 trades a week that roll through there. In SuperCoach, you've got access to 3 of your trades a week. If you've got a boost, you can really get aggressive and go to 4. If you've still got boost by the middle portion of the season, I would say well done to you at that point, but congratulations on that. Does the extension of the buy, like you've both talked about tactically, how we could use them for our upgrade trades and for the players we should be attacking or considering, does it actually get easier for us to score well as a direct result of that? Because normally we've just targeted the one buy that's got the 2 teams. So in this year, it's St Kilda and Fremantle again. But we're not talking that sort of language this year as heavily approaching the buys, as they got to target that one with 2 guys only, with 2 teams only. It does feel to an extent easier to get to a best 18 with a higher quality of team. Is that a truer statement, or is there some deception that we could fall into that might not be the case?
It's a truer statement in a way, but it's also built upon the fact that a lot of these players on that round 13 bye, obviously the Freo and St Kilda bye, a lot of teams have a player or 2 and maybe even 3 on that bye already. And so we're not wanting to try and push and force that targeting. I'm talking, down back, Sinclair, Nazai Wanganeen Miller, maybe even some people looking at Jordan Clark. In the midfield, you've got Andrew Brayshaw. In the forward line, you've got Jack McRae. People are even looking at trading into someone like a Rowan Marshall this week as a ruckman on that round 13 bye.
Philippou could be there. Yeah.
I mean, Philippou could be there as well. These are the sorts of reasons as to why it's not as talked about at the moment, that round 13 bye, people should be trading into players from it. There's also a little bit of a weirdness associated with it because of the fact that we had that early buys at the start of the season. The teams that had that or had their fixtures shifted as a result of that tend to have their buys a bit later on in the rounds 14s, 15s, and 16. And those are the players that would typically been looking to upgrade to. And so I think it's very natural that teams have started to end up with a very even split across the bye rounds, and because it's over the 5 rounds, we're not nearly as stressed about it. The caution I would be having now is really having a look at that round 12 bye. It's creeping up. It's only, we've got round 7 this week, round 8, round 9, round 10, round 11, and then it's there. So we're going to be very much having to consider which players on that bye we want to be trading into and potentially even trading out of soon.
Ritz, I'm curious. This is historically sort of the time of the year where we're very much in our upgrade cadence, where things go well for us. We can do the one downgrade to a rookie that's fattened, get into somebody that's in SuperCoach and Dream Team on the bubble, or is really accessible under 300,000 in AFL Fantasy. The other trade, we hit upgrade, and we feel like for a 4 or 5 week stretch, or at least 4 out of a 5 week stretch, we can get away with that sort of trades. And I do want to talk upgrades and downgrade options and how we navigate that in a moment. But it does feel like it's an interesting moment in time in our trading cadence at the moment. And I'm curious on both of your thoughts around this, but maybe Rids, I'll start with you, is when is it okay to either step away from or change our trade cadence approach? Because no one year is identical to another. No one's team is identical to another, and let alone anyone's coach's philosophy and ideologies are identical. So how do we help coaches to do that?
Yeah, so let's look at Ned Long as a perfect example over the last couple of weeks.
Sure.
Now, what we've got is we've got the fallacy of price, okay? There's a price tag there. And we go, no, when we're doing the upgrade, we have to have someone 800,000 plus. But what we got here is someone that's expected output is at a price tag of 750, 800 in AF. And so what it is we've just got to realign our brain a little bit to go, okay, this guy is actually going to get to 750. That's his end point. That's where I want him to finish. That is an upgrade in that instance. The other thing is sometimes we have those weeks there, MJ. Last week is a perfect example. There is no clear downgrade option. Who are we downgrading to? You know, I saw people going straight into Bussenlinger straight away without even, and that's great because we're getting what we want on the other side, but we've traded in a red dot that's not going to actually help our teams, whether it's generating cash to make it another, component of it, or whether it's to contribute as a score through buys. So we've got to be very, very careful. Now, the way we do this is look in future. I'm going to give you 2 names right now for rookies that I think everyone had on their radar in pre-season. Josh Smiley and Allen from over in the West Coast. They haven't debuted yet, MJ. So what we want to do is put them on our radar and see how they're going in the VFL. So Josh Smiley last week played VFL. He played his first full game of VFL. He got 23 touches, went at about 50% efficiency. He still needs work, okay, on his tank. Richmond aren't going to rush this guy. They've won 2 games already. So we might not see him till next week, the week after. But guess who happens to play Richmond next week? It's West Coast. That's the time when you could jump into a guy who hasn't played yet. So start working out next week and then revert back to this week.
Yeah, it's some good advice. Your thoughts around that, Mini? Not so much specifically about the rookies, although that obviously impacts our trading cadence, but stepping away from that forced ideology of 1 up, 1 down, 1 up, 1 down, 1 up, 1 down every single week. How do you differentiate when you're, maybe this is a better way to phrase the question, between forcing something that's not really there versus allowing the natural cadence of what your team needs from you? How do you differentiate between the two?
It's a hard thing to do, and it's really what separates the good coaches from the really great coaches is knowing when it's the time to not do it necessarily a double downgrade, but a downgrade and a sideways move and fix a rookie, or when to try and shuffle a couple of premiums up. People are talking about the likes of maybe it's the right week to move someone like a Tom de Koning, or it's a couple of other premiums that people are concerned about, like a Caleb Daniel or a Clayton Oliver. It's about knowing when these sorts of players are the right ones to move on to. It's always about the combination of trades that you can make in any given week. And it's always about the combination of trades of players that you're moving out and the players that you're moving into. We're getting into this period of the year when, well, I think we're almost at the third week in a row where there hasn't been an amazing rookie to move into. And it is making it very hard because coaches are rightly trying to look for wherever they can. We see a Buslinger is named, comes in, has a 40. How many games is he going to get? We don't know. A guy like a Carroll was on the bubble last week in DT and SuperCoach. He might be saved by the fact that Silvani might miss a couple of games, but he had a lot of turnovers early in that game, and there were a lot of Carlton fans who were very unimpressed with how he performed. It makes it very hard to be able to keep getting these upgrades week on week when you don't have the players to regenerate that cash generation. And, we always talk about how the longer the game goes, the more deeper into the season you go, the more the cash generation becomes important. We can really start to see that separation probably happening over the next 5 weeks and as we come into the buys, because if you can get to, as I was talking about before, having 18 premiums on each of the buy rounds over that 5-week period, compared to other teams that might be a premium or two behind, that's 50 to 100 points every week for 5 weeks, let alone the 3 or 4 weeks before we get to the buys. That's, that in the summation of it over a 6, 7, 8 week block, that's nearly 500 points. And right now, that'd be the difference between, about the 100th ranked coach in AFL Fantasy to about the 10,000th ranked coach in AFL Fantasy. It's a big gap.
Reds.
So MJ, I just ran out a bit of steam.
That's okay.
I just ran out a bit of steam with my voice just a second ago. I do apologise. I'll just finish off what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Sometimes when there's no clear downgrades or upgrade options, we can use like as Minnie just said before, a sideways trade, a downgrade, whatever it is, okay? At this point in time, though, going from a hasty type of rookie that you might live on your bench, whether it's a Camporeale, whoever it is, to a Josh Smiley type with better job security and scoring potential is actually a massive upgrade for your team and your team dollars.
It's why people in SuperCoach, for example, last week were jumping onto a Matt Flynn. Despite his price not feeling like I was making a downgrade, it was the way that we were able to accelerate that cash generation. Ned Long, as Rids you mentioned before, had sat in that spot. And a Huswaite in AFL Fantasy, he's rookie priced in SuperCoach and Dream Team, but Mini in AFL Fantasy, he's almost that type of player that could create that creative cash generation. Is probably too unfair a term, but it's not the traditional up and down move that coaches like to make now. Does a player like Huswaite sit in AFL Fantasy as that potentially way of getting points on field and generating some dollars without really compromising the integrity of your team?
I think creative cash generation is the exact way that I'd phrase it. We're looking for a way to maybe eke $150,000, $200,000 out of a player over a 3-week block, while the Hawks are missing a midfielder that would normally be getting games to them. I think it's definitely a strategy that coaches can employ in order to try and ride the wave, try and ride the break even for as long as you can. You go into that 5 to 600K bracket, and there's a couple that are actually popping their heads up. There's a Brady Hoff that's been moved into the midfield for West Coast after being more of a lockdown defender and went 81 on the weekend. Hosway had a 74. Even a Sam Banks has been getting a bit more time and been scoring reasonably well for Richmond. And it just buys you a little bit of time because we've got some rookies that are really capping out at a nice price, like a Davidson, like a Trainer, like a Pryor, like even like a Levi Ashcroft is probably coming towards the end of when you'd want to be hanging on to him for. You can really almost do a micro downgrade, scrape 150, 200Ks off of someone like a Levi or a Davidson, and you chuck that onto a head of another one of these guys, maybe you got a bit of cash in the bank, you can get up to a 900K player and make your upgrade that you're looking for. this is the way that you kind of keep that cash ticking over. You ride the bit of the break even. You still get a player that you want in. And if, in 2 weeks, 3 weeks time, when Connor Nash is back and Hosweight's dropped, you've got a nice 650k kitty sitting there ready to cash in and do the exact same thing. But in 3 weeks time, we might have a rookie like Rids is talking about, like a Bo Allen or like a Josh Smiley.
Rids,
Can I just throw up an interesting name? Can I throw up one interesting name? For those people who traded out of Lindsay a couple of weeks ago, he's a very intriguing option this week in AFL Fantasy.
Yeah, for that exact same space. Does maybe another name I'll ask you, Rids, about is a player that was hugely owned in our teams in the preseason, and barring the injury setback, I would have suspected he'd be one of the highest owned players based on last year's deliverables and expectation coming into 2025. I'm talking about Mateus Philippou. The team report from a health and injury perspective says he's clean, he's good to go. Whether he plays VFL or AFL or not is ultimately an unknown. But is he also that sort of creative cash generation, that place to break cadence, that it is going in blind, which in AFL fantasy that the risk is protected a little bit more with the weekly price cycle movement as opposed to SuperCoach and Dream Team where you're kind of holding on for that third week to really bubble along. Is a Philippou that same sort of player that in the forward lines off the back of I don't know, like a Daniel that we might be looking at, or a Davidson even? Is that the sort of move we could also consider? Probably more for AFL fantasy, though, than for SuperCoach.
So my thing with Philippou, okay, is what I was saying before about Ned Long. It's not about the price tag. It's the expected output price tag. Where is he going to get to, okay? So he's a really interested one, Philippou. In AFL fantasy, he's priced at about 66. So the fact of the matter is, if you expect him to get 85 or 90, then he's 100% like in the picture, yeah? Because that's 20, 25 points of upside just there. So what you got to do, though, is what's your risk profile of your team already? Should you be jumping into him as soon as he debuts without a game under his belt after having a layoff with injury? Or should you take the option of just taking a deep breath, I'm going to get him next week, and plan to get him next week? And guess what that means? His lower price tag means you could probably go from a lower priced rookie, Finn O'Sullivan, I'm looking at you, okay, that hasn't done anything, to a Philippou, and that's a massive upgrade, yeah? And you're getting a rookie off the ground at the same time.
Yeah, it's good thoughts. Like we keep talking about these, and Rids talked about a Josh Smiley specifically as somebody that we know Mini is going to be coming into the Richmond side sooner rather than later and will get good opportunity. That's what we know the Tigers are going to do. They've arguably, to this point of the year, according to what media experts had thought, outperformed the expectation, and credit to them for doing it. But we're looking for guys under that 350 sort of price point in fantasy and talking under 200,000 in SuperCoach going, yep, I do need some creative cash generation. I do that. But I also want to see who the heck are these rookies that are going to come through? Because there is that downgrade dilemma. Rids has put Smiley on the radar for us and a Bo Allen. Buslinger's there. I'd be shocked if he got dropped based off that impressive victory against the Giants. I can't see that changing. Whether or not he's still there in 2 or 3 weeks' time is another conversation. But where is this cash and this money coming from, these upgrades, when we're going all the way down? Who are the rookies we could be looking at, taking Smiley out of the mix? Who are the rookies that we might see play soon?
God, you're really testing me here, because the way that I look at it, it's pretty bad. There's the West Coast midfielder that's been tearing it up a little bit, who'd been talked about a bit. Oh gosh, this one's really going to get me, isn't it?
Well, there you go. People will be
tells you all you need to know.
They'll be
There's
listening
literally
and watching
nothing.
and screaming at you. Going,
Luca Grego, that's the one I've been thinking of.
There you go.
Grego apparently has been tearing up the waffle a bit. He's one that, I mean, you typically want to look for the clubs that haven't had a successful year so far as the ones that are likely to debut players.
Yeah.
And it's also the clubs where they are trying to quote unquote go through a rebuild, like Richmond is definitely doing, which is why Smiley is on the radar for a lot of coaches. West Coast should be trying to do similar. So that's why players like, as I mentioned, Gregor, or even someone like a Shanahan might get a game
Gross
for them.
might come back. Yeah.
Gross could be coming back in. St Kilda, I don't know where they're at, but I feel like they have to debut some players. There's talks of players like a Q Boxall, even an Alex Taru, who unfortunately is suspended for 4 weeks, although he's having his hearing as we speak right now to try and get that reduced or wiped off even completely, potentially. And the other one is maybe, like an Essendon. Are they going to try something funky? Is a North Melbourne going to bring a player out? These are the sorts of clubs that you want to be looking at for where these rookies are going to come from, because the teams that are in finals contentions and the teams that are really pushing for top 8 and top 4 spots, they're going to probably have already debuted the players that they wanted to debut for the year.
Yeah.
So we might only get another half a dozen between now and maybe the end of the mid-season buys, and at that point we start to see a bit of a separation in the pack and teams start to really try and see where their lists are at.
Yep.
So it's getting pretty slim. It's getting pretty slim.
And the good thing though, MJ, is we do have the mid-season draft coming up.
That's
soon.
true.
So we may have 2 or 3 options appear out of there.
Yes, especially if Essendon go to the ruck division, for example. Now, those that are Boyd owners, Harry Boyd, not Hugh Boyd, they're not really going to be making any cash. Archer Reed owners are, but again, that's where your cash generation can creatively come from. I like Bo Allen as a call. I think he's going to get some opportunities. Leo Lombard is only a couple of weeks away. I'd expect he'd get some opportunity at Gold Coast. He won't have a hugely favourable fantasy or SuperCoach scoring role, but if he's just there to predominantly get you the 30s, 40s, 50s and free up some cash, I do think that's a play. A player like a Charlie Edwards at the Crows, knock on wood, but if a Millerer misses a few games or Mitch Hinge is unsuccessful in his appeal, he's the type of player they might look to bring in there as well. So I think we always get to this point, not every year, but every couple of years, where we kind of get to the third way through the year and we go, there's just nothing there. We don't like anything. And then somebody comes along and takes a spot. An injury comes along and creates an opportunity. And even if those things don't happen, I thought Ridge summed it up beautifully for us. We're all in this same situation. So we're all finding our way through it, and good coaches will find a way through it. And those that are the week or two ahead of the pack will find themselves getting those big league wins and getting that acceleration in their ranks. So while it might feel a little bit frustrating building when it comes to the downgrades that are there, I think Buslinger's going to be okay for a couple of weeks as long as the Dogs keep winning. Smiley's coming. I think Bo Allen's coming. Leo Lombard's not too far away. Tyru is not too far away. It's suspension pending. Travaglia's still affordable sitting through there. So there's options. We're not dead in the water here. It's just not as free flowing as we'd probably like. What about on the other side of that, though, boys? And maybe Riz, I'll start with you. Yeah. No, jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say that after every time the buys happen, you will see coaches grab their players and do some tweaks. They might give someone a run in a spot that hasn't been working for them pre-buys. You know, that sort of stuff always happens after buys. So make sure you're paying attention to what happens the first game after their buy to see if any role changes have been picked up and if people are getting more opportunities in better spots. And I'm thinking of a Hasty type. Like we all thought he was going to be that defender rook, at the start of the year. He was going to do pretty good scoring in the back line. But he's the type of person I'd be looking for. If he suddenly appears in the team and suddenly appears out of the vest, they're the types that we need to be jumping on straight away.
Yeah, it's some good advice. Gosh, the vest feels like it's going to make or break a few teams this next couple of weeks. That's for sure. Minnie, talk to me about some upgrade options, like on the channel on a Monday, I drop my top 10 AFL Fantasy trade targets. On a Wednesday, I drop my top 10 SuperCoach trade targets. But in a more general sense, are there some players that are just screaming out to us at the moment that are saying, pick me? Or are we seeing what I think is more happening across the formats, a dozen options that sit there for teams, and it feels a little bit buffet-ish, which is whichever you need in your team, there's probably somebody that's priced at a pretty good spot for you to be able to go grab it. It doesn't feel like, at least this week, that there's a must upgrade up towards the top end guys or a value premium that's there. Any of those in your eyes, or is it that buffet approach?
I think it's a buffet approach. I'm in selection indecision overload. There's so many different routes that coaches can go in their team in terms of who they want to upgrade, who they want to trade out, what line is their weakest, what line is their strongest, where are the top 6 players. Like, we are, 7 weeks deep into the season, and I don't think we have a consensus on who the top 8 mids are across the formats. Not even close. You could maybe say, I'd maybe be comfortable putting 3 or 4 players into the top 8 midfielders across the formats, in probably Dacos, Butters and Bontempelli in SuperCoach. I'd probably take Brayshaw in there in AFL Fantasy, just on form. Forward line, it's not really that much that people are looking to upgrade to. It's more the DPP candidates, because most people have, a Bailey Smith and McRae, maybe a Rankin, maybe a JHF, probably a Daniel. You're not really looking to go to too many of those. The ones that people are eyeing off is a Christian Petrarca, who had the pop score on the weekend, and there are still concerns obviously around him. And then there's also the Chad Warner, but he's walking straight into a Toby Bedford tag this week, most likely. And despite that price, if you can wait the extra week, it'd be fantastic too. And then the backline, there's a plethora of value. I mean, Max Holmes is going to come down in value. Tom Stewart is dirt cheap if you really hate yourself and when you put yourself through the pain that I've been suffering in 2025. Even a Jack Sinclair is going to come down in value. A Dane Zorka was absolutely dirt cheap, right for the picking. If you think you think he's going to turn it around.
Yeah, she's all another that
it's a pick your poison type of week.
Yeah,
she's absolutely another. Even in the ruck line, people are eyeing off a Rowan Marshall. People are saying even Tristan Cherry's come down. If I've got a Max Gawn or a Tim English or a Tom DeConey and I want to get funky, I can move to him. Like, it's really one of these weeks where coaches are presented with probably even 30 reasonable trade options or trade routes, and deciding what is best for your team is really going to be a tricky week. Like, it's just not an easy week to do it.
I'm going to throw a few more things out here now.
Please.
AFL Fantasy, the hype word at the moment is value, and rightfully so, rightio. Everyone's hunting value. You know what that presents us, though, MJ? That presents us with aggressive attacking plays at people that are the higher bracket. So someone like a Calm Butters, okay, priced at about 108. If you think he's going to do 112, and you've got Adam Chera, okay, if he doesn't get off his suspension, that's a round 12 to round 12 play to someone that no one would be targeting due to the value aspect. And guess what happens next week? That opens up a value Philippou. The week after, it opens up a value Mills. It opens up a value Kitty. There are ways to play this that doesn't have to be value first. If you've got value options next week, in the next week, and the next week, why not go and grab that big dog that no one wants to get and have him as a unique?
Yeah, I really like that. Mini, where is that junction point in the year? And maybe it's not as definitive year in year, but we do preach value a lot and get guys at the right price point and don't, quote unquote, overpay. But is there a junction point in a season, and this season specifically, where we start to value points on field over the financial value or the perceived value a player may offer for us? Because in the last 6 to 8 weeks of the year, I don't think anybody's thinking, got to get that team value up, got to get that value buy. It's just like, get the best option. But in this third of the year, we're probably still preach value, but also want the best options. Is there a junction point in the year? Is there a marker? Or as Rids pointed out, is it more just a specific player and scenario that a team might be in?
People tend to think it's around that buy period where you just go, all right, I'm at, 20, 21, maybe 22, quote unquote, premium or close enough premium type players. I can start to finish off those last little ones, do those micro upgrades, whether it's someone like a Clayton Oliver and you say, look, he's done well, he's averaging me 95, but I want to take him up to a Marcus Bontempelli or a Butters or whoever it is that's popping. But it's not when it comes to, I guess, the players themselves. It's actually really when the magic number starts to turn, which does coincidentally line up with that buy period. It starts to get to its highest value around then and come down after that point. Realistically, it's also about how much cash you've actually got on your rookies, because at the moment we have players like a Trainer, like a Cleary, like a Davidson, all still kind of going up in value or reaching near their maximum value at that 600k price bracket. You can get 350k off of them if there's a good rookie to downgrade into. Like, that feels fantastic. But when you get to that mid-season buy, you're quite likely just scraping 100, 150k off of these sorts of players. And that's all you can get. So that's the reason why you end up doing these small little micro upgrades. So while you've got the players that you can get the value off of, while they're at their maximum price and they're not starting to turn back the other way, that's when you really can start to go for the value, because you can get the upgrade week on week on week. And then once you get to that next point, that's when it's like, all right, I'm at 22 players that I'm comfortable enough, or 23 or 24 if you're going for the extras and SuperCoach and Dream Team. I'm comfortable enough scraping that little bit off. But if you can still get to a player that's, top 8 or top 6 while still hitting the value, then that's the difference. Because paying $650,000 in SuperCoach for a player that's been doing it all year and suddenly turns around, or $1 million in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team and has been doing it all year, but then suddenly goes the wrong way, those are the picks that can really hurt you on the run home.
So, MJ, I want to try and break this down into a mathematical equation for you, okay?
Okay,
For
I'm getting the notepad.
Now,
Yes,
DT
okay.
and SC is a little bit different because of the limited trades factor,
That's
okay?
true.
There's 22 players on field for AF, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Let's just say, roughly, we want all 22 players to be $1 million price, correct?
That'd be great. That'd be
So
great.
that's 22 million.
Yes.
There's 8 guys on the bench. I believe 2 defenders, 2 mids, 2 forwards, 1 utility, and 1 ruck. So there's 8 on the bench.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say we want them to be around 450, just for hypothetical reasons, rightio?
Sure.
Go 8 times 450 equals 3.3 million.
Mm-hmm.
Add that to your 22 million. There's your end goal, is your 25.5 million team value. Rightio, yep. Give or take. Now, as soon as we get that give or take aspect, we can start releasing. Now, I still think Philippu's going to make a lot of money. We still got Mills to make a lot of money. We still got Kitty Coleman to make a lot of money. We still got guys like Smiley, Allen making a lot of money. Harry Boyd may play at some stage. Rowan Marshall has looked sore.
I agree.
There's a lot of money still to be made. If you're up around the 23 million value now, you've only got 2.5 million before you're in that ideal world to start building to get a 23rd premium. Yes. So that's put in a mathematical aspect to it, and I hope people understand that a bit better.
Yeah, it's good. And it's not a perfect science in any regards like that, but rather you're talking about indicators and markers to be able to go, okay, now I can start approaching points on field as the ultimate objective, rather than keep building my team value as the critical point in Junction right now. Great.
I guess what, MJ? People can go and have a look at their teams. Get a spreadsheet. Put values of players who you want in your final 22. Someone like a Philippu, for instance, is 600,000, 650,000 or whatever. He may not hit that $1 million, okay? But the thing is, you might be happy with your F6 as Philippu, because you've got the top lines like a Butters, like a Zorko, like a Whitfield, like a Sheasel. You've got the top of the top. So that's where you have to do it as a team-dependent exercise and work out what your goal is and when you're going to be happy at the team value.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. I want to talk flex in a minute with you both, which AFL Fantasy don't yet have. I would love them to have, but they don't. That would be great if AFL Fantasy could bring the flex in next year. But that's a conversation for another time, I suppose. But I'll hit that for SuperCoach and Dream Team soon. There's two highly owned guys. I'm keen on your boys' take. Maybe I'll hand one to you, Mini, and Rids, I'll hand the other to you. Rids, you can talk to me about Caleb Daniel in a moment, and Mini, I'll give you Clayton Oliver. The reason I want to put them on the radar is they're highly owned, so you could build a case that their scoring is irrelevant to what it's doing at the moment because everybody's got them. It jog on next player, next point. But they've certainly, Clary's not lived up to the expectation this year, whether or not that's an overperception or not. We'll put that there. And Caleb Daniel, well, those last couple of weeks, it's clear North Melbourne aren't really loving what this back line and ball movement is looking like. Hence why Harry Sheasel's gone back into defence. And so, Rids, you can talk me through Daniel in a moment, but Mini, are we just being overly worried about Clayton? Should we be looking to trade him out now? Is this a issue we address at the buy, or is this the type of player we just push to the bench as the 23rd premium type option? What should we be doing with Clayton Oliver?
So I want to contrast Clayton Oliver from 2024 to 2025, because I think it's really important that we have that comparison done. In 2024, towards the end of the season, here's what some of his scores: 26, 109, 45, 99, 63, 100, 62, 43 AF. And in SuperCoach, 32, 101, 51, 100, 79, 92, 75, 38. Now we compare that to 2025. His lowest score in the first 7 rounds in AFL Fantasy is an 81. His lowest score in SuperCoach in the first 7 rounds is an 80. We can see that there is a clear difference between the two. So we shouldn't be worried that he's reverting back to 2024 form. He's clearly got over all of the other issues that he was having on and potentially off the field. That's fantastic. Now, the question is, can you get a leg up by trading out of him? And the answer is obviously yes, you can. Because whilst he's had a really good floor, his ceiling in AFL Fantasy has been a 114, which was against the Kangaroos. And in the same game, he had 130 SuperCoach. Outside of that, in SuperCoach, he hasn't broken the ton. And he's only broken the ton 3 times in AFL Fantasy. The question is, do we see his scores potentially building over time, or are we worried that he's just going to become a stagnant pick? If he's a stagnant pick, you can gain by trading him out. If you see that the scores are going to improve over time, that's when you want to hold on to him. I personally think that there's bigger fish to fry in your team, but if he's, if you're in those top 50, top 100 ranks and you want to really take a punt and really get a point of separation away from the pack, fading away from him is definitely a viable option, but it's not this week, not with the matchup against West Coast. It's next week when he's got the matchup against Hawthorn.
Yeah, it's a good shout. Rids, it's different though with Caleb Daniel because the expectation was with Clary was what he was or is or that, whereas Caleb was brought across for a purpose to be the distribution outlet off halfback. And while he's been doing that, the defensive liability that Bulldogs fans had known he was, I think North Melbourne fans are now starting to go, oh, Bevo might not have been as crazy as we thought. There might have been some thoughts behind it. Talk to me about Caleb Daniel, because we thought he would be, and it's a universal we, that he would be just someone we keep on field for the whole year, and he's at F5, F6 for the year. But his last 3 weeks specifically have been scoring okay, but more critical than that, what he's doing in the actual game of AFL. It is hurting his team. We're not calling for him to get dropped, but is this a player we should be looking at and considering and not just assuming He's our F5 for the rest of the year.
100% it should be. You know why it should be, MJ? Because he's made a heap of cash. He's the third highest average in forward right now. You have maximized the points and the cash. Don't get sold into a keeper like season-long keeper. He may not be. The last couple of weeks have already shown us he might not even be top 6 by the end of the year. So that's going to be a decline. If you have a strong feeling about it, why can't you maximize Daniel to Philippou and maximize a couple of 100,000 free cash? We're talking about creative ways to find it. Daniel in the last 5 is averaging 91. If you think Philippou is averaging 85, that's 5 points difference for $200-something thousand cash. You would be silly not to look at it.
Yeah.
Everyone is
a similar
tradable.
split. Everyone should be. I agree. Yeah. Mini, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I do. And part of the reason why it's interesting is because he has had 2 quote-unquote poorer games in the last 2 weeks, 80 and a 75 in AFL Fantasy and an 88 and an 89 in SuperCoach. We contrast that to how he started the season, where in AFL Fantasy he was averaging 105, and in SuperCoach he was averaging about the same. But we look at who he's played in those last 2. It's been the Blues and it's been the Power. Currently, on DVP, it's the 2nd and 4th hardest matchups in AFL Fantasy for designated kickers. And in SuperCoach, I think it's the worst. It's up there as well. It's not pretty. I think Port Adelaide's about the 6th hardest and Carlton's about the 4th hardest. There is narrative to why his scoring has decreased. His fixture does get a little better in the next 3 with Essendon, Brisbane and Richmond, 2 of which are quite friendly for designated kickers. There's a world where he's not a top 6 forward and that you want to trade him. And yes, he does have the round 12 bye, so that does make it even more enticing to be trading him out. I just don't know if it's the week to do it. Yes, his price might have been the peak. His break-even AFL Fantasy is still 99. There's every chance he goes back to 100 for the next 3 weeks.
Yep.
We'll have to see how it all shakes out with the way that North Melbourne do line up. And team sheets is something that I've been watching very carefully at North Melbourne to see what they're actually doing, because we are waiting for the Sheasel Gold Mine to open back up, and eventually it will. But Caleb Daniel, I don't think, is the one that's going to get hurt when it does happen.
And that could be the interesting piece, yeah.
There's an interesting name to throw into the North Melbourne mix, Radio. First things first, it might not actually be Daniel that we're actually worried about. If Sheasel goes back to halfback full-time, we know that the North Melbourne track watchers are already saying McKercher's been back at halfback a fair bit in the last couple of weeks. We just need to monitor this. Don't need to trade him right now. Not a high priority. Just monitor and trust your gut feel on this. Because if Sheasel goes back and dominates that possession like he does at halfback, there might not be enough mouths to feed for Daniel.
Yeah, that's really true. Last thing I want to hit on this week's strategy session is talking about the flex. So we've done a bunch of stuff for AFL fantasy coaches through it, and the strategy session is if you play classic, no matter the form, the content you're going to get, the conversations you're going to hear are applicable for you. But specifically, I do want to focus on flex for just a moment. For SuperCoach and for Dream Team, I think it's a brilliant addition. Hats off to the people that made the decision. I've already done a video on our TikTok and on our Instagram pages talking about the handful of reasons why I think it's such a brilliant initiative for both the casual and for the more hardcore type player. But it was probably last week, Mini, that we probably started to see coaches start to use it more strategically, specifically with the type of upgrades that they were looking at. So in SuperCoach, more heavily than Dream Team, but more in SuperCoach, it was the way to get into a Matthew Flynn without getting out of any other ruck that historically we would have had to move out of. In Dream Team, we were able to access, if we wanted to, the bottomed out price of a Tristan Cherry, for example, and get them into the flex as the way of upgrading. Others have used it for more rookie matchups, but it felt like last week, just with the scenarios that approached us, it gave us that opportunity. Now, some coaches that have made those moves are a little locked in, at least for now, how they're going to choose to use flex. So for coaches that haven't locked themselves in to using flex with a third ruck option, how could we be utilizing this position? Because tactically, this is opening up a whole new Pandora's box of opportunities for us with extra scoring outlets on field and extra tactics. How should or how could we be using flex this year?
It's just to time your upgrades, it's to try and get the right player in the right line that you want at the right time and field the right rookie and loop the right players on and off your field, depending on who you've got that's not playing. Like, you can be super creative with it in order to maximize the amount out of it. Like, if you're locked in with the 3 rucks with, a Flynn being popular in DT and in SuperCoach, potentially coaches going to all 3 of TDK, Gorn, Cherry, or maybe even grabbing a Rowan Marshall and locking yourself in that structure. It's, again, that's a decision that you've made. You're kind of prioritizing the points on field over the flexibility. But realistically, there's so much versatility that coaches have available to them because of this flex position. I don't think there's any one way to play it, but I think what it can allow you to do in the long run is get to the absolute top of the tree premiums that you're wanting. And if you're wanting to run 9 midfielders or you're wanting to run 3 markmen, then getting to that is just like such a godsend in these formats.
Yeah, Rids, your thoughts on how we could use flex, not only right now, but over the last 2/3 of the season?
I think it's got to be later on in the last third of the season. It has to be another mid. Right now, we've got many, many mids averaging 100 or more right now. If you have a look at the other lines, we've got much, much less numbers.
Yep.
So I really believe that whilst we get into that, someone like a Ryan Marrick, for instance, is great, but he doesn't have a ceiling, yeah? So you need a person with a ceiling in that flex because you want a pop score at any time. Now, Marrick, for instance, the next 3 weeks he plays Melbourne, Richmond and St Kilda. That's 3 pretty handy matchups for the role that he's playing right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so he might be a perfect opportunity. Put in your flex, give him another 3 weeks before you go upgrading him because he's got 3 matchups where he could deliver a pop score.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of that's how I see it. But when we get deeper into the season, it has to be mids, in my opinion, because the mids are the volume of 100 plus across the ground. And then you can always swap and change and then get a 24th premium, I suppose, and then try to loop and through. It's going to be crazy at the end of the year with flex, put it that way.
Yeah, it's going to open up a bunch of options. And then, like you said, there are going to be coaches that in SuperCoach go, no, I want that third ruck because historically we've been locked out of one of them and that have been a hard challenge. While, as you rightly said, Rids, the mids have historically in SuperCoach been always rewarded well with high quality ball use and high quality possession placement and impact. So it's going to be fascinating to me to see those that have got a ruck in that flex spot. How do they use that? If it's Flynn, it's clearly a cash grab, but for how long? For those that put a Cherry in there, how do they do that? And is that because they plan to move out of a Tom de Koning or not? Or as Rids mentioned, they're using a mid. Is that where a Nick Martin type or a Sheasel type all of a sudden become that extra bit of additional value for us? It's going to be super intriguing for me to watch how people use flex in SuperCoach and Fantasy. Ultimately, we'll know exactly at the end of the year. Yeah.
So MJ, I don't know if Matt Flynn isn't a longer option than just a money grab at the moment. We've seen in the last 2 years, last 2 weeks, 144 and 100 in SuperCoach. He might actually be that ruck option to swing on and off the ground when you need it. he could be perfect. He's already signed the shielding, and he's had that. He can score, yeah. He just hasn't had the opportunities before.
Yeah, it's true. Look, and again, we're heading to the buys as well.
Number one, why not?
Yeah, it's right. We're heading to the buys. Depending on the structure of your team, we could need a bunch of those. Hey, guys, it's been awesome to talk with all three of you. Rids, I know it's not the easiest sometimes. It's good to see you back on the health recovery. Appreciate you. We've forced you out of retirement, let's put it bluntly, to bring you back in, not just to celebrate your number one in Dream Team, but just to let people know exactly that you're still kicking around the coaches panel. You won't hear him all that often, but it's good to have you back on the pod, mate.
Can I just give a couple of shout outs? First things first, JP, I hope you're doing well, brother. We all know that your recent battles, we hope you're going well, mate. Friend of the pod.
Yep.
Rowan Marketplace, can I just say the market share stats are mind-boggling. If you haven't seen them, get on them. I want to just call out another two guys that I know pretty well. Vams and the Eagle Who Screams, I call him. Both top 10 in AF right now. Amazing work, boys. Keep it up, yeah. Amazing work. So, yeah, it's been great being back for a one-off, but hope everyone's good. And I am still active on X anyway.
Yes, he is. We've got all the details of where you can get in touch with Rids in the description of this episode on X if you're not already following him. Hey, MiniMonk, always a pleasure, mate. I know we'll have you back on the pod again next week.
Good chat and good to see you back, Rids.
If you want to catch up on any of the other episodes that we've been dropping over on our YouTube channel, those trade target episodes, Monday afternoon, we do the AFL Fantasy one. Wednesday afternoon, we drop the SuperCoach one. You can go in there and check that out while you are there. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Yes.
Last words, yeah?
Yeah, okay.
Last words.
Yes.
Dream Team.
Yes.
I know I'm number one, but it's not about me, yeah? Number two, Gabe is a friend of me and you who messages us every Sunday night after lockout. Yes. He has some extreme challenges and is a rock star. He's number two, mate, after a top three finish a couple of years ago.
Yes.
And can I call out a number three? This is the most world-blowing news ever. The coach of number three ranked team in Dream Team is 9 years old. That's a good friend of mine, Gaz's son. He talks to the Eagle Who Screams and gets advice around trades and everything. But 9 years old, MJ.
So some 10,000 coaches that are playing Dream Team are being beaten by someone that's not even 10 yet. That's very encouraging.
And much more skillful than all of yous. So have a lovely day.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great week. Good luck with the trade moves that you're planning to make this week.